Start. So my name is Chris Adams, and I am the president of Balancing Act. We make budget engagement software, including a simulation and a taxpayer receipt. And we've actually got a new project, or a new product that we'll be sharing with you a little bit later. This has been such a bizarre year that we have been trying to sort of stay in touch with our clients and others who are interested in doing budget engagement. And so we've been holding state level roundtables just to give everybody a chance to kind of talk about what they're experiencing and what plans they might have, and to deal with various challenges. And so this was intended to be small. We were looking for about 8 to 10 people, and it looks like we've kind of got that number. And the idea is to just give everyone a chance to interact with each other and to share some challenges. And then we've got some things that we can show you that we're observing across the country, and that's kind of the agenda. So why don't I just start, or maybe we can all introduce ourselves, and I'll just, my Brady Bunch screen, I've got, the first person is Amy Flynn, who is on our team. So Amy.
Nice to meet everybody. I think I've been sharing emails with you, and here in somewhat sunny Northern California. I'll pass to Dan, our other co-worker.
Oh, hello, I'm Dan Ferguson. I make the software for Balancing Act.
Dan makes the software, but I always love to point out, and he might be tired of me doing this, but he's also the former mayor pro tem of his town in Missouri, which I just think is fantastic.
Very small town.
Very small town. So Meredy, you're next on mine.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Meredy Simonis, the Director of Performance and Budget at the City of Largo. Been here for about 12 years. And I will kick it to Will, who's with me as well.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I also work in the Office of Performance and Budget here in the City of Largo.
And Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Carlisle, City Manager for the City of Sebastian.
All right, nice to have you, Paul. And then Bridget.
I'm Bridget Clements. I'm the Finance Director for the City of Titusville, and I have Jennifer Marquardt in my office. She does all of our grants management here for us.
Okay, great. Well, good. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll turn it over to everyone to kind of contribute to the conversation. So, as I said, we've been doing these roundtables in this very strange year at the state level, just to give people who are in the same state a chance to talk with each other and kind of, share and learn from each other. These are the folks that we anticipated being on this call, and I think some of them were the governments who were anticipating being on the call, and they might join us a little bit later, or they might just be listening to the recording. Both of those are fine. But then this is the agenda, and it's a really simple agenda. We thought we'd just ask each of you to share a little bit about the challenges that you're seeing this budget season, and the strategies that you're thinking of to communicate with the public. And I know it's always hard to get people started with sharing on these types of calls. I don't think this one should be as big of a deal because it's such a small group. But just because I know that what the City of Largo is doing, I've asked if Meredy and Will would just kind of kick us off a little bit, just to kind of talk about what they're thinking in terms of budget engagement, what they would like to communicate with the public on, and the conversation they would like to frame up based on the challenges that they're seeing in their city. So Meredy, just kick it off to you maybe.
Sure. So from, I guess, a big picture strategy perspective, we're definitely going to be struggling with the amount of money that we have to spend in a short amount of time. With all of the COVID stimulus dollars. And from my perspective, it's going to be a challenge to engage with the community, just because it always is. Last year, we didn't have a great community engagement experience. Nobody was really interested in digital engagement. So I think that'll be another challenge this year. But also the way we spend this money needs to stay true to our strategy. And unfortunately, where we're at, there are a ton of facilities related projects. And I don't think that we have the capacity for any more. So I think the biggest challenge will be spending the money in a way that honors our strategic plan, supports the capacity that we have, or aligns with the capacity that we have, and then meets those timeframes that the federal government has established. So. And then doesn't set a whole new trajectory for us on strategy that we've worked so hard to build. And I'll let Will add to that as well.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think Merity covered a lot of it, but I think balancing the, we just released our proposed capital improvement program, and there's always kind of the litany of unfunded things in there that never quite make the cut. But then we also have funded things whose needs are much larger than what's currently shown, and so balancing those one-time things with those ongoing capital needs and trying to figure out what the right balance for the community, and like Merity said, for long-term strategy is, a short-term shot in the arm isn't going to change the long-term dynamics of certain infrastructure issues. So between execution capacity and long-term capacity to sustain some of this stuff and community needs, I think that's a lot of the stuff we're juggling with. And like she said, last year we really tried to try some different approaches from previous webinars and things that we listened to hear from other folks, and didn't get quite the level of engagement as budget people would always hope we would get. But and I'll be curious this year to see whether that keeps up. Obviously last June, July, everyone was pretty consumed with other things. I don't know if the dynamic's going to be different this spring or early summer, or if it's going to be more of the same, and we got to keep trying some different things.
Interesting. Oh, well, in my experience, I think the majority of budget folks don't really want too much budget participation. So, but I think that's changing with a lot of trends just in terms of people expecting information and GFOA recommendations and so forth. Merity, if I could just ask a follow-up with you. You said that you were concerned that you might get bumped off course from the priorities that you all have spent a long time establishing. I'm wondering, what are some of the forces that might derail that discipline, do you think?
Question. So some immediate things, I'll just stay on the facilities track since it's presently storming around me. We've got several facilities in one area of the city that are actually nearing the end of life and they need some repairs. Some of them have revenue challenges, things like that. So we could, with this COVID money, decide to put quite a bit of money into these facilities that serve a very limited segment of our population and don't really serve the immediate community around it, which is primarily underserved. And we could decide to just fix these amenities and, keep them going for a little bit longer, or we could take more of a strategic approach and free up capacity by funding some existing things that are more shovel ready and aligned with our strategic priorities, and take the time to develop a proper strategy around that area of the community. My fear is that because money just fell out of nowhere, we will take the easy way and appease the stakeholders that are impacted immediately, or the interest groups impacted immediately by these particular facilities, because we can, and that doesn't feel like the best option for the community. So that's kind of the immediate thing that I'm thinking about right now.
Well, if it helps, when I talk to finance directors and CFOs from Maine to California, they've got that same concern. They want this money not to just fill in some short-term gaps or to pay for a couple of projects, but to actually help set a course for increased financial sustainability. So I think it's a challenge that a lot of you and your colleagues are feeling. The other thing that a lot of folks are adding on is just trying to satisfy some concerns about equity and to use this one-time money to increase that as well. So interesting. Well, thank you for that. Paul, on my Brady Brent screen, you're next. So what are you seeing in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's recovering from COVID, and our business recovery was always a challenge for us. Our revenue share was down substantially. So, we had to cut back a lot in this year's fiscal budget. We have some major projects, just like Largo, you all with your facilities. We're building a new public works compound, some airplane hangars in our airport. We've probably got on the books right now in our design build about $25 million in projects that we're working on. For our budget next year, our revenue share seems to be up and seems to have recovered. We don't know if that's going to be sustainable, but we're looking at, when you talk about engagement, we have done a very good job with Zoom. We probably have more ways to interact with our council and our our budget advisory boards than anybody with Zoom and Facebook, and you can phone in, you can come in. We have ways for them to communicate. We set up tables and chairs and video and microphones outside for people who don't want to come inside. But our biggest challenge, I think, with this new funds is what are we going to be able to do with it? They've been very vague on what that's going to be. Well, I haven't seen all the rules on that, nor have I seen where we're going to apply yet. I haven't seen anything on how we're going to get this money supposedly in May. One of the top priorities of our city is our Indian River Lagoon and our St. Sebastian River. So we're directing a lot of that money. If we get it, my plan is to convert septic to sewer along the Indian River Lagoon. We've been doing that for about 4.5 years now, providing grants to connect people to sewer and water. We just did a $1.8 million project. We're doing a $1.8 million with the county project to convert sewer septic systems to sewer along the river and on the western side of our airport as part of our public works compound. So, you know, our environmental is huge for us. And if we're able to use those funds to just pay for the connections, we can take 129 businesses and residents that are right on the Indian River and put them on sanitary sewer, which is just awesome for us. I mean, the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that we're going to take off the system is going to be huge. So these are things that we're looking at in this fiscal year. I can't put any more projects on my staff. They're over. You know, we did our project meeting. My finance director said, you know, when you came here 3 years ago, we had 1 page. Now we got 4 pages double-sided of projects. Yeah, I might ought to back off a little bit. So, but that's where we're at. We're clicking.
That's funny. And Paul, you'd mentioned that you'd made all sorts of accommodations to allow public participation via Zoom and putting chairs outside and so forth. Have you noticed a change in the public's interest in your government's finances in the last year?
Yes. So there's a concerted effort. We have an election coming up. I know that's people don't usually get involved till there's elections, but there's some people that are questioning some of the funding for the public works facility. Not too much on the airport hangars, because most of that money is coming from FAA and FDOT grants. So we don't get too much on the grant projects, but you know, there's the 5 or 6 people that are vying for a council position that are outspoken about things that they're not even becoming educated on. And then in-house, we've got issues where unions are starting to request additional funding, you know, that's not there. We actually raised taxes last year, the first time the city's done that in 15 years, to be able to provide a raise for them. And they're going to ask again this year. So we're going to do a class and comp study to see where we are in comparison to other neighborhoods and other cities. And we've got and I know y'all have got the same deal. You know, we've got this 5-year plan for this $15 minimum wage and how that's going to affect the ladder all the way up. You know, you bump somebody up to $15. You got an employee that's been here for 15 years and they're making 20. Are they going to now want 25 because the scale of difference? So these are all things that we have to be able to communicate to the residents when it's not just a trickle down, it's going to be a trickle up when we start looking at wages and benefits.
Interesting. And I'll just say, just in general, just looking across the board, we've seen in the last year a very distinct uptick in interest among the public in learning about the budget, participating. So it'd be fun to hear a little bit more, Meredith and Will, about what's going on in your community. Maybe it's just that they trust you so darn much that no one's really questioning it. But when on all the bad cuts are happening last year, there seemed to be a pronounced uptick, more along the lines of what Paul was talking about. And then Paul, also, we're seeing especially an interest lately in staff learning about the budget and participating, especially when it looked like a lot of governments would be doing layoffs last year or asking for furloughs or even some pay cuts or asking staff to pay a little bit more for their benefits like health insurance. That staff were really getting interested, and really that was led. We saw some participation from cities and counties in doing that. But we saw even more with school districts. And I think it's because school districts have this large professional class of teachers that I think generally feel like they've got more to say than they have the opportunity to say. But we've really seen a lot of school districts sort of doing internal budget engagement just to kind of help people feel better about what might be some tough decisions. So it's interesting, very different stories from you guys. Bridget, I know that we talked a little bit earlier before most people got on, but I'd love to hear a little bit about what's going on with you. And I don't know if you're in a place where you can turn on your camera, but we'd love to see you too.
Oh, goodness. Well, I have my camera. I'll try.
Okay.
On my laptop, and it is just in this weird little place in my office. So
Okay. And I don't want to make you go through.
it's a pain to do. So I don't know.
Don't worry about it.
Anyway, so Titusville. Oops. Now it's gonna do. Hang on. Kind of lost you guys. Look at that.
Oh, we hear you.
You can hear me? Okay, good. I'll lost you
Yeah.
guys trying to get my computer back.
Okay.
So Titusville was kind of fortunate through this whole thing, I think. I was just looking at my CAFR results this year compared to last year, and our revenues, our total general fund revenues were up probably about $500,000. So, and our expenses were down just because of just trying to retain people. We found that a challenge this year. With regard to planning, I think I was sharing with you earlier, we do a 5-year projection and planning every year. So we kind of know what big ticket items we have coming in the future. So I'm not as worried about this Recovery Act money derailing us from our strategic priorities, because I think we have a good handle as to what those are. I'm more worried about our ability to be able to spend the amount of money that we are receiving and the amount of time that we have to spend it, because we're not going to be adding more positions. And a lot of it is construction related work, especially with our water utility. And it's just hard to get contractors. You know, those kind of people that you need to do that kind of work are really hard to get right now. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. We've begun a series of meetings where we've taken all of the requirements that are in the, in the legislation that was passed, and we've kind of segregated out those sections A, B, C, and D, and we've begun to identify projects that meet our goals within each of these areas. A lot of the stuff that we're planning on doing with helping some of the people recover economically, especially the lower income people. We're kind of partnering that up with some of our housing and CDBG grant programs that we're administering some of the CARES Act stuff. So we're just going to flow some new criteria in through that. So we think that we can respond to that, because as soon as people saw in the paper what we were getting, and they were hitting us up wanting to know when we were going to give them money. So I think some of these things are going to be kind of easy for us to do once we get the guidance. The hard part is, as accountants and finance people, we need to know how we're going to be audited and what it's going to look like so we can set it up the right way. So we've got politicians and management and citizens wanting us to tell them how we're going to spend this money right now. And we kind of have an idea, but we don't know how it's really going to work because we have no guidance. And I think that's the frustrating part for us right now.
Interesting. And the guidance is supposed to come next month, right?
I read something today that said in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Yeah, and also from what I understand, it's supposed to be much less restrictive than the CARES Act funding, I believe.
Yeah, my concern is how are we going to track it? Because at some point you're going to get audited on it. And I want to make sure that we set it up in a way that we can track it efficiently. And that's my big concern right now.
Right. And it's just an awful lot of money too.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. Huh. Well, anybody else? I mean, like I said, this is meant to be a discussion. If anyone have any questions or additional comments? Well, in that case, if I hope it's of interest, I was going to share with you just a little bit of what we're seeing around the country. We've heard that people find that useful, and then just kind of share sort of a few use cases that we've seen that we think might be useful. So one of the trends that we're seeing is that mayors and elected officials, because the financial issues have been so big and so in the forefront, have been getting much more personally involved. I've got a couple of slides that sort of show how that's looked. The big one that we're also seeing that you all touched upon was, how do you deal with the stimulus funding? Very large amount of money. And then, kind of the traditional one of just sharing trade-offs, that you don't have an endless amount of money. And so how do you deal with those trade-offs, and how do you get informed input. We're seeing a lot more use of technology to sort of, connect with people, especially during COVID. And that's a big question I think that people in the field have is, will that continue? Will people gravitate towards that, or will they kind of go back to face-to-face? And I think a lot of people would acknowledge that most face-to-face techniques for involving people in budget discussions, e.g. a hearing, have really not been that useful over the decades. We're also seeing I'm surprised that we had some people who were like PIOs and communications directors sign up, but I don't think they're on. We've seen a much more multidisciplinary approach in the last year, which we think is a positive thing, because very often we get finance directors and finance departments that create these excellent simulations, but the public doesn't know they're there. And so we've seen a couple instances where 8,000 residents have actually participated. And I think it's because the finance department made a really useful framing tool to have the conversation, and the communications people got it out. And then we're also seeing this movement towards institutionalizing budget engagement, and that actually comes directly out of some GFOA recommendations. So in terms of just what we're seeing with mayors and other elected officials is just go into TV and making really simple, sort of low quality, not low quality, but low production value videos. This on the right here, this is Mayor Bob Kelly of Great Falls, Montana, and he is a town of about 65,000 people, and he just looks right into the iPhone and says, you know what, we've got a tough time. We'd like to have residents learn about our budget and then give us some informed input. Same thing with Mayor Mooney from College Station, Texas. He does have a green screen behind him, which is kind of fun. But once again, he's just kind of looking right into the TV, or right into the camera, and sort of telling people, this is what your elected officials need to have from you in order for us to make a budget that reflects our values. And also, Mary, to your point earlier, that also comports with our plan that we've been working on, and we're trying to have the discipline to maintain. And then we've also seen a lot of media paying attention. So on the lower left is Mayor Peduto of Pittsburgh. And we've seen all sorts of places, from very large media markets like Washington, D.C. to really tiny ones like Lynchburg, Virginia. TV stations have been actually, encouraging folks to learn about and participate in the budget. This is sort of a unique one. This is the woman on the upper left is County Executive Jan Gardner. She's an elected county executive in Maryland, and sort of similar, I think it was Bridget, I believe, who said that or maybe it was Paul, who said that they had some money that because they had budgeted so conservatively that they had $10 million in Frederick County, and so mid-year through the budget cycle, they said, we've got $10 million. And so they invited departments to, submit proposals, try to spend that money. That came to about $65 million. And so they put it onto a budget simulation and let the public participate. They had about 2,200 users provide input on that. And they found that to be very useful. The media loved it. Once again, the local TV stations and newspapers, Yahoo News did a story on that. I think that was actually something very productive for them. This is an example of how one community adapted to not being able to meet face-to-face. This is Tacoma, Washington. And so this is a Zoom meeting, and they're using our simulation in what we call meeting mode, which is a way of using the tool in a kind of real-time format where you get live results from what everyone's saying. And then they had this nice commentary over here by city staff. And so the meeting was kicked off by the city manager. But then the guy on the top is the budget analyst that sort of made the budget simulation discussion tool, and then Katie Johnson in the middle there is the budget director, and Jacques Cologne is the director of strategic planning. And so essentially what they did was they invited residents to go through this simulation, and then they provided kind of real-time commentary to say, oh, it looks like people are not supporting our affordable housing plan, for example, and then the strategic planner could say, well, what, this is actually a part of our strategic plan, and this is why it's in there. And so they just had a little bit more of a robust conversation. It was actually a very useful effort. And just to show you the interest that they had. So first, Tacoma, Washington, I think they had about 6,000 people participating in their budget engagement exercise, which was pretty remarkable for a city that's not that big. But then just for that one online meeting I just showed you, they had 382 people register, which I think is pretty remarkable. So they kind of, followed the general trend, not universal, but the general trend of seeing a lot more interest this last year. And this, in my earlier slide, I mentioned that we're seeing a lot more collaboration between the budget finance function and the communications function. We're seeing a lot more branded campaigns. So we're seeing it from both very big places like Phoenix. They actually have a permanent website they've created called Fund PHX, Fund Phoenix, where they sort of make up-to-date information available. They have a version of our budget simulation, trying to really kind of be proactive about making sure that residents understand where their tax dollars go. And they've had some taxpayer revolts, I'll just say, in Phoenix. It's a very large, complex place. And so city leadership is saying, let's just, proactively sort of fill the void and let's fill it with good information and let people provide some interaction and let them, have a little bit of input on some of these major decisions. So we're seeing it in some very big cities like this. Over here on the far right is Roseville, California. This particular year, they won the GFOA Award for Excellence in public engagement on the budget. And not a super large city, but they created a branded campaign called Engage Roseville. Once again, trying to just let people know where their tax dollars are going and to give them a sense of a legitimate opportunity to provide some input. This top one is from a school district, Cherry Creek Public Schools, and they also have this thing called Future Forward. I thought I would also share with you some different types of things, especially because they're local. So this, I don't know if you can make out the logo up here, but this is Miami Lakes, and they've actually created a taxpayer receipt, which is kind of a cool way to kind of demonstrate value. So the idea here is that you say, do you own a home? And if you say yes, there's a place for you to enter the value of the home, and you can go to the assessor's website and look up the value and get a sense of how much property. You actually get a pretty solid figure for what property taxes you're paying, and then it shows where it's distributed. And we'll share this deck with you, and this is a hot link, so you can click on it and take a look at their taxpayer receipt. This next one, and I say this, I haven't looked at my phone in the last hour or two, but as the Derek Chauvin trial in Minnesota is working its way through the judicial process, we helped support GFOA to create a new document called Time for Change, which is intended to help cities and counties think about pressures being put on police budgets. I think very, very few localities are actually, thinking about deep and dramatic defunding to the police, but there are a lot of places that are thinking, should we consider some changes, or even if we're not, seriously contemplating major decisions or changes, how can we at least make this conversation more productive? And so this GFOA document, and once again, if you, it will send this deck out to you. It's a hot link. It's a free document. It just provides a nice framework for thinking about it. And one of the things I like about it is that a lot of it's performance based. And so they're encouraging local governments to come up with useful indicators that can help the public understand public safety. So I'll give you an example of a bad indicator, which is, should we add another 22 FTE to the police department? Well, the public really doesn't know what that means. They don't know how that's going to impact their lives. But an example of a good indicator, one that's suggested in this document, is to let people weigh in on what should be the average response time for a police call, for a 911 call. Should it be 4 minutes? Should it be 5 minutes? Should it be 6 minutes? And then each of those performance levels actually you can approximate a cost that would be associated with that. And we think that's actually much more useful. And the technology in terms of transparency and simulation software is actually quite good at that type of thing right now. And then the other thing that's in this document, and this is becoming a theme in a lot of different documents that GFOA is putting out, is this highlighted part here, where they just suggest that you institutionalize budget engagement, that you don't wait for a crisis, whether it's a financial crisis, whether it's a crisis in confidence of your police or public safety department, but to really, just kind of get out front, so that, because things are going to come up. 16 months ago, none of us would have expected that we would have been where we were midway through last year, and that in some cases, at least for the time being, we're kind of reversed of where we were 6 or 8 months ago. So the idea is to just create this opportunity to have these two-way conversations, so that you can be frank with people and let them sort of understand what your constraints are and provide some input. I thought I'd just share this with you too. This is City of Fort Lauderdale, and they were unable to be with us today, but this is a budget simulation that they have. This is actually currently on their website. And last year they kind of began to kind of move into this area of thinking about what is it that we want from our police department. And so under police, they've got the big number 134 million, and they're kind of asking people, kind of what are some of these programs that you want. And then they've got this big one up here, which is to maintain police department service levels. This is really where all the money is, at $133 million. I think that one thing that one direction I think I see a lot of cities and counties going is to maybe play this out a little bit, and as I said, sort of ask some more publicly relatable or understandable questions, such as response time, that type of thing. But I do think it was useful for the city of Fort Lauderdale to begin to have this conversation this year and to sort of put some of these options out there for the public to weigh in on. And then this is just kind of our accumulated wisdom of having done budget engagement for the last 20 years or so, is just to find ways to convey constraints. So major constraint is that you can't sell, or you can't spend more money than you have, and that's a weird one this year because you've got this new influx of cash, and it's temporary cash. To provide context so that people understand what you're doing with tax dollars, and we actually just got a new peer-reviewed article that just came back that said when people understand what government's spending money on, even on a simulation where they have the option to cut it, they don't cut it if they understand what it is. And we think that's a very powerful thing. And once again, it kind of validates that concept from GFOA to not, or to institutionalize public engagement on the budget. And then this last one is consequence, that when you have a budget choice that every budget choice has some consequence, to convey those to people so that they can actually see what those look like. Let's see, I think is there going to be one more thing I was going to show you. I was going to show you a couple of examples. So this is from Fort Lauderdale. Once again, we'll send this link out to you, but this is their simulation where they're letting you, kind of increase or decrease certain options, and to, say, should we invest in shot spotter technology, and to provide a context and things like that up here. This is the taxpayer receipt from Miami Lakes, where they say want a receipt for your estimated taxes, and then it just says, fill this out and you get an estimate. And so they ask you if you own a home, and if you say yes, you can put in the value of it. And I don't know what a typical value would be there, so I'll just put in $350,000, and then it gives an estimated taxpayer receipt. And so you can see that this person was paying about $809 in sales tax, and then you can see all the different ways it was broken down. And they just emailed me today to say that they've had some really good success with this. And this last one, I'm going to put in the category of draft, but it's one that I think I wasn't going to show it, but when some of you were talking about what your concerns were coming into this call and going into this budgeting season, this is from the city of Denver. Once again, very large government with a lot of resources. And so they're using a modification of our simulation, just not for their general fund, but just to help think through what they should do with their ARP funds. And so they're expecting to get about $1 billion. And so they have listed the types of things that they want to spend the money on. So things like housing stability. And so they've got some things that they're locking down, but then they're saying, well, should we have some, we're thinking we might spend about $35.9 million on anti-displacement and community support. Well, you could spend a little bit more on that if you want, but then you've actually overspent, and so you might need to go and decrease it in certain areas. Now, the thing that I think is really interesting with this, and I think to have a government like Denver that has a lot of resources sort of demonstrate this concept is good, but it's really not nearly as complicated as you would think. Is that they're using a new feature that we have on our budget simulation. It's called the impact feature, and Dan was the one who principally made this. And it's not set up yet. As I said, this is a work in progress. But what they're going to do is they're going to essentially assign a value for financial sustainability and a value for equity to a number of these budget choices here. And as somebody goes through the simulation, they're going to be able to see both the impact on the current year's balance, and then also on the financial sustainability over the long term. I'm not sure how they're calculating that. I think it's some projection, I think about 5 or 10 years in the future. And then equity, does this in some way improve the services that are being equitably distributed to residents of Denver? So we're really excited about that as well. So I think that was most of what I was going to share. So I'll just kind of stop there and see if anybody has any comments or questions. And while you're thinking about that, we've got a brand new feature that Dan has also been developing, and we call it the project feature. And I know that Will and Meredith at Largo, you guys do a lot of work on capital projects, and this is really intended to be sort of a simplified version of the simulation for that. So, Dan, would you be willing to sort of share what you're cooking in terms of the project feature?
Yeah, let's see if y'all can see my screen here. See that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we're in the client area here, and I'll just show you quickly how this is built. Oh, I got logged out. Give me a second here.
Or maybe show the front end first, Dan, so that they'll see what your product first. Keep the end in mind.
Okay, so here's what it looks like on the front end. So a user is just going to see a very simple list of projects. They can come through and select them. As they do that, they'll be using up the budget. And then when a project gets too expensive for what's remaining, it gets disabled. But we looked into the research of this and saw that ordering the choices is pretty important. So we offered a ways to people to set their priority. And we're looking at different ways of presenting the data. And I've been working this week on making this accessible so it can all be used with just a keyboard and a screen reader. So when you actually, let's see if I miss anything here that we want to show. You can add all the details, but we keep it very simple right up front. And then looking at the way this is built on the back end. Now I'm logged in. Oh, went to the wrong one though. Excuse me. So when you add a project, we just collect some very basic stuff: the name, the cost. You can put in the details if you want, and then you can actually select. Oops, name is required. All right, let's make one real quick. Let's call it. What do you guys want? Walking trail.
Sounds good.
And then we can actually go in here and we can upload a photo if you've got some of your own, but we've added stock photos through Unsplash, which is some really high quality images. So let's see, walking trail. If you don't have a photo of your own, you can just come in here and select one, and then it gets added. So now that should show up here. And it's that simple to make what we're hoping will be kind of visually stunning and easy to understand sort of participatory budgets. We're still working on the branding, so I haven't applied the new name to that yet. But what's also really exciting is since we collect the projects you want to see and the order you want to see them in, we can do some kind of interesting things with the results. So here's an early version of that. So we can look at just a straight count of the votes, ignoring the ranks. We can do an instant runoff where you start with just everyone's first choice, and then you eliminate the lowest and reassign those votes to their second choice, and so on until you get down to your budgeted amount. So this one shows all the votes kind of by rank as a heat map. And this uses the Condorcet method, which basically makes head-to-head matches and see which gets chosen in the most head-to-head matches. And then maybe the thing I'm most excited about is, this is another way to look at the numbers, weighting it by rank, but this column over here lets you actually choose which projects you would fund. And as you do that, it's going to tell you how many people are going to be happy with your choice. So 18 voters got their first choice. As we keep adding them, we can try to raise that. And we try a different alternative. Now we're up to 100% got their first choice. And so we're looking at ways to kind of give you an analysis of how well your selections match up with the preferences of your voters. That's a really quick view of what we're working on. Any questions on that?
I'll just tell you a little bit of the genesis behind building this is that we do a fair, so believe it or not, Australia is much further along than the US in terms of digital engagement. And so this was a type of a tool that we have a partner that called Bang the Table. It's an Australian company. And they actually wanted a tool like this, mostly to use in the Australian market. And so we began to develop it for them. And it really, I think, takes, I think what we're understanding is that there's a lot of possibility to use it for capital projects, for using it to program a park or a new facility. And we're sort of excited about it because it's much lighter and easier to use, and it can be used, you know, it can be used independently of anything else. And so we're just kind of excited about that. So Dan, we're really excited about that, and we'll let everybody know when it's available. But at the moment, the number one, my number one favorite example of doing a capital budget belongs to Largo, and we've just been chatting back and forth. And I just asked Will if he would share what they have done with their simulation, with their capital improvement plan in Largo. I think it's a really cool implementation. You able to share your screen, Will?
Yeah, 1 second here. I'm just getting it set up. I really love what you showed as far as some of the things that we're continuing to try and do differently. If you take a look at our CIP document this year, we actually keep playing around with how we rank and score and prioritize projects to get to a simpler sort of we've this year gone to a simple sort of 4-point prioritization, and then we actually do an exercise like the simulation you showed with that ranking tabulation that's built in there, which is really nice because that's what we're doing kind of on the side in Excel to see, you know, if we ask everyone to prioritize that way, where's the critical mass of support or consensus around those different things. So that's something, what you all built there is something that we've been kind of toying around with as well. So that's pretty cool to see it integrated that way.
Neat.
So yeah, trying to balance that with what we're doing here. What we keep finding is sort of like the Fort Lauderdale example you showed, simpler, clear, direct choices are a little easier for people to work with. So like what you all just showed for projects was really nice from that standpoint. But we've just got our capital improvement program set up by our portfolios. And then the way we tried to do it to keep it simple where the options are all of our funded things and all of our unfunded things, and letting folks select if they wanted to unfund a particular project, and if they need more information about it, we've got things hyperlinked to our visualizations of capital projects. So that's actually one that I need to clean up because it is not in there. But I think the fire station reconstruction is there.
But this, I think, is just brilliant, Will, and you guys are the first in the country to integrate Questica's capital module with Balancing Act. I think it's just a really, really nice implementation, especially when things are a little bit more complex. Projects is meant to be a little bit lighter to create, a little bit lighter to use. But when you're looking at a complex capital project, I think this is just brilliant. You guys really should get, you know, a lot of credit to you guys for doing this.
Well, only did it with guidance and help from you all and the Questica folks, so we appreciate it. But yeah, so currently this will be, I think, our second year of having this really fully built out this way with the integrated projects. And let's see, what do we have here? And we'll be actually getting information out over the next couple weeks, and hopefully people will be a little more engaged this spring than last spring when everyone was consumed with COVID. But yeah.
Very nice.
I have a question. This is Bridget. You all put these things on your website, I'm presuming?
We do. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you deal with the issue of ADA compliance? And I ask because we were one of those lucky cities in Florida that got hit with those ugly letters because of our budget book and all this. And we had to take, anyway, we have our budget book. We pay somebody to remediate our budget book for us. We don't have our CAFRs on the website because it's just too much to remediate those. So we have a little link that you can request them via email. We took down our dashboard that the public would use to look at our expenses because there was a way for us to get those ADA compliant. And because we got one of those nice little love letters, and we fought it, and we ended up during the time that we were fighting it, everything kind of imploded. But we're not allowed to put our dashboards back up anymore because of that. Are these ADA compliant?
So what you're looking at now, Bridget, is it's sort of two softwares that are being combined. So the budget simulation software is ours, the Balancing Act, and that is WCAG level 2.1 level A compliant.
Okay.
And so that satisfies most requirements in the United States. Actually, in most parts of the world, it does. But I don't know about the Questica, but Questica, I would imagine that they've done quite a bit to make theirs compliant too. But Will and Meredy, I don't know if you know the answer to that with Questica.
So I don't have the specific answer on it, but I believe the answer is yes, because we too got hit with the same letters in the same situation, and we went through everything on our website and made it ADA compliant. We transitioned our budget book, and we have a tool that goes through and scans everything on our website for compliance. So I've not been alerted that Questica is an issue, so I'm going to assume at this point that it's okay. And I thought we engaged with Questica on that a while ago too.
I believe so. Yeah, we checked with all of our vendors for things like this because we pulled things down that weren't and left things up that were.
And Meredy, you all were the first of our clients to actually bring this to our attention, and we actually invested quite a bit about 2 years ago in terms of making ours accessible. And I know that Dan is working very hard on the new module as well to make that at least level A accessible.
Yeah, it's hard. We realized that when we looked at the analytics on our dashboard, that we really weren't getting that many people to look at it. So when we took it down initially because of everything, we just really didn't invest in putting it back up because not that many people were choosing to go on and look at it. Maybe we have a city like that. I don't know.
You know, Bridget, one of the things, and I'd be happy to send you this report. GFOA in December 2019 did it was a report of the Online Financial Transparency Task Force, kind of a mouthful. But one of the things that they recommend is they said that transparency, most North American governments, so the GFOA covers Canada and the US, but so most North American governments have really achieved some level of transparency. Some do it in a really great way, like Largo, where they've got dashboards. It sounds like you guys used to have that. And then some just make PDFs available. But you know, the data is there for the most part. But what this GFOA task force said is that transparency is one thing and it's good, but they did recognize a lot of people weren't using it. But what they're saying is that the next step is participation. So looking at transparency plus participation, they think is the way to go. And they specifically mention the use of simulations and simulations that have that show constraints and that also have drillable levels of context and detail. So I think that's actually the next step. But in terms of usership, one thing that we're really seeing is that budget officers are budget officers because they're fantastic at handling money. They can make a plan, stick to a plan, and prioritize it, and all those things are sort of core competencies of budget and finance people. And then it's a rare budget and finance person who also is a great communicator, and they do exist, and we know many of them, and they're terrific. And I would even include Meredy as being one of those. But we're really seeing that to bring in that cross-disciplinary approach where PIO communications office works with a communication or with a budget finance is really where we've seen things sort of take off. Like Tacoma, a city of 200,000 people, and they've got 6,000 people spending 17 minutes on the simulation, providing informed input. That's the type of thing that we're hoping to see more and more of.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense in some regard. I know we do that, but we do it in person more so than online. It just doesn't seem like our citizenry, at least right now, really understand how to use computers. I feel like, I don't know what it is. It's just a part of it.
Well, it can be hit and miss too. Like we've seen some communities, so we do a lot of work with Toronto has a lot of suburbs, like Miami, and you can have one town that has, of 30,000 people that has, 2,000 of its residents that actually, come in and engage and join the conversation and provide input. And then a town right next door using the very same tool, where they have, 120 or so. And so I think a lot of it is to the degree to which the communications function gets involved. But then the other thing I'll just mention, so getting professional communicators involved is one thing. But the thing that we've really seen that makes a difference is when your elected officials indicate that this is important. Where elected officials say, they basically say, I'm so glad that our professional staff has, sort of framed up the tough trade-offs that we as elected officials need to make. And now I'd like to engage residents, my constituents, in thinking through how we should make these choices. And that seems to be the right division of labor. So you've got the professional staff, the professional administrators sort of focusing on the data and the facts and making sure that things are accurately presented and fully presented. And then having a component where elected officials, based on good data, sort of lead that public conversation. So this is a pretty inexact science, but there are a lot of things out there that are, I think, looking promising and some good directions to move towards.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm
I'm curious.
less gun shy.
Yeah. I'm curious what you all think about my observation that we're seeing elected officials get in the last year getting more involved in budget and finance decisions. Is that something you've seen? And maybe is it something that you welcome or something that you're really not that keen on? Because sometimes they're the ones that can buffet you off of your 5 or 10 year plans.
Ours are more involved at the higher level in the strategic planning process.
Mm-hmm.
We had a mayor that was very much in the weeds for years, and he was very engaged at a level of detail that I didn't think was really appropriate sometimes for a governing person function.
Mm-hmm.
But our council and mayor now seem to let staff do their jobs. We explain to them everything, but they're more at that strategic governance level. And I like that.
That's just right. Yes. Paul, were you going to say something?
Yeah, sorry. We had some strange stuff go on in Sebastian during the COVID, and we had 3 new council members that got elected. And one council member wanted to get into the weeds on every little thing that we did. I mean, any contracts that were brought, it was very, very difficult, questioned at time of day to the point that it was just unbearable. And we were the first city in the state of Florida to successfully, or in the state of Florida to successfully do a recall election. And those 3 council members were recalled and removed from office. And we now have 3 new council members. And they don't delve into the budget as much, but they did get into it this year because of the loss of revenues that we had with COVID and the revenue shares and that. So, and we meet with them and we go over with them, and we have a budget advisory board that goes through our budget. But yeah, they're a little more engaged than they were in the past because of just the difficulties we had. And I think every municipality had.
Yeah. And what we found is that elected officials often don't know their role. It's rarely what Bridget just described. It's usually that they just dive into the details and get involved in your business in a way that's really not very helpful. Or they just look at the budget and they're just like, oh, it looks fine. And in fact, there's some middle ground. And I think that, more and more, I think that professional staff and professional budget directors and so forth, they're trying to find a way to kind of, help them find that right spot. So they're not in the weeds and they're also just not kind of, ignoring things in some ways. And it's a tough thing to do. So, well, anything else? We don't want to keep you guys any longer because I know that you're starting to head into the really busy part of your cycle. So anything else before we end for the day?
No, I appreciate the time and talking with everyone. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to meet you. And Meredith and Will, thanks for showing what you guys are up to. And it's really exciting stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I appreciate
Thanks
it. It
for
was nice to meet
facilitating.
everyone.
Yeah, you bet. Take care, guys. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.